I used to love my mornings. A quiet street, birds chirping, coffee in hand, and no one around to ruin my peace. But then the arrived. Not figuratively, literally, a shiny, red parked smack in the middle of my driveway. Again. At first I thought, maybe it's a mistake, maybe he's visiting someone else. But no, every morning. 7:45 a.m. sharp. There it was, gleaming like a taunting trophy. And every morning I had to squeeze past it, balancing my coffee, trying not to swear in front of the neighbors who were starting to peek out of their windows. I didn't know the kid personally, just the mother. A woman who, let's say, had a talent for spoiling her only child. I had seen her waving her hands in the air like a conductor orchestrating his every whim. And apparently, her son had absorbed this art form perfectly. The first time it happened, I tried to laugh it off. In the driveway, cool kid, nice car, go park somewhere else tomorrow. I thought a friendly conversation would fix things. I even left a polite note. Please don't block my driveway, thanks. The note disappeared by the next morning. I thought maybe he didn't see it. Or maybe, worse, he saw it and thought it was a challenge. By the third day, the polite approach had become a ritual of passive-aggressive note writing. Different colors, different pens, sometimes a little doodle of a frowning face, anything to get a response. Nothing. The sat there, smugly gleaming, daring me to act. One morning, I actually saw him step out of the car. He looked at me, smirked, and said, "Oh, this your spot." As if my driveway belonged to him by some cosmic law I hadn't signed. I blinked. Was this a joke? Or was it the kind of brazen entitlement only a child of a wealthy, indulgent parent could pull off? I tried diplomacy. "You know, I really need this spot. Could you park somewhere else?" He leaned back, hands behind his head like he was sunbathing, and said, "Mom says I can park wherever I want." And with that, he strolled inside his house, leaving me standing there, coffee threatening to spill, while my heart threatened to explode. It wasn't just the inconvenience, it was the principle. My driveway, my rules, my morning. And suddenly, I felt like I was living in some twisted sitcom where the villain had 4 wheels and 0 respect for human decency. By the 5th day, I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. I started noticing patterns, the exact time he arrived, the route he took, even how he liked to park slightly crooked just to make me squeeze past the car like a gymnast. I even joked to myself that the had a personality, arrogant, shiny, and completely unapologetic. Neighbors were starting to notice too. Mrs. Henderson from across the street gave me a sympathetic nod one morning, whispering, "That kid again." I nodded solemnly, feeling like a warrior preparing for battle. The battlefield was my driveway and the enemy, a golden, 4-wheeled menace. By the end of the week, I realized I was done being polite. Notes, conversations, friendly gestures, none of it worked. There wasn't just a car, it was a statement, a daily affront. And something inside me snapped. I paced my driveway one evening, plotting, imagining all sorts of creative ways to reclaim my space. My mind ran wild. Maybe a temporary barricade, a harmless prank, or just something more dramatic. I couldn't let him or his mom win anymore. And that's when I knew. This story wasn't going to be about me politely coexisting with a spoiled kid. It was going to be about reclaiming my driveway, on my terms. I went to bed that night with a mixture of dread and excitement. Tomorrow, the war begins. Tomorrow, the isn't just a car, it's a challenge. And I, for one, was ready to answer. I woke up the next morning with a sense of grim determination. The sun was barely up, the birds were still sleepy, and there it was, the parked like it owned the place. I took a deep breath, trying to channel patience and reason. Today, I decided, I would try diplomacy one last time. I scribbled a note on bright pink sticky paper. "Please park somewhere else. I need my driveway, thank you." I placed it carefully under the windshield wiper. Then I waited, watching from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, pretending I wasn't already forming backup plans in my head. The boy appeared around 7:45 a.m. just as predicted. He opened the door, glanced at the note, and laughed, like a cartoon villain twirling an imaginary mustache. Then he stepped over it and got in the car. I swear, if the could smirk, it would have. I knew diplomacy had failed spectacularly. I tried another approach. I knocked on the door. Maybe face-to-face would make a difference. Maybe human interaction would remind him there were boundaries. I rang the bell and the mother appeared. She was wearing a silk robe and a look that suggested she believed the world revolved entirely around her son. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Your son parked in my driveway again. Could he please park elsewhere?" She blinked, genuinely confused. "Oh, is he bothering you?" she asked, like the concept of inconvenience was foreign to her. "Yes," I said, trying not to lose my cool. "Every morning. It blocks my car, my deliveries, even guests. It's getting out of hand." She laughed, a high-pitched, dismissive sound. "Oh, honey, he's just a kid. He doesn't mean any harm." Just a kid, right. A driving, smug, borderline villain kid, whose definition of fun included tormenting his neighbors. I tried humor, thinking maybe I could appeal to her sense of decency, or at least entertain myself in the process. "Well, kids in my neighborhood usually use tricycles. Yours prefers a sports car." She didn't laugh, she didn't even flinch. She just waved me off, like I was a pesky fly buzzing around her luxurious life. I realized then that humor and reason had failed. Notes, polite knocks, jokes, even exasperated sighs, they all amounted to nothing. The boy's sense of entitlement was apparently genetically encoded, nurtured by a mother who believed that rules were optional. By the middle of the week, my frustration began affecting my mornings in ways I hadn't anticipated. I started leaving extra early, navigating around the like it was a booby trap in an action movie. I even developed a ritual. I'd sip my coffee, squint at the car, and mutter elaborate revenge scenarios under my breath. Nothing physical yet, just fantasies, but they were getting increasingly cinematic. Neighbors began noticing too. Mrs. Henderson gave me a sympathetic nod one morning. "That again?" she whispered. I nodded grimly, feeling a strange mix of solidarity and shame. Even the mailman started lingering, giving me little smiles, like he knew the epic daily struggle unfolding in front of my driveway. Then came the ultimate humiliation. A delivery driver accidentally rang my doorbell while I was still there. He looked at the car, then at me and said, Is this the owner?" I had to explain, apologetically, that no, I didn't own but yes, it was blocking my life. By Friday, I realized something crucial. I couldn't rely on notes, polite conversation, or hope for parental enlightenment. The diplomatic route had failed. I was standing at the edge of something new, staring down the like it was an invincible enemy in a video game, and realizing the game had just changed. That night, I brewed an extra strong cup of coffee and sat on the couch thinking. I could wait it out, but I doubted patience would ever pay off here. Diplomacy had taught me one thing. Some people, and apparently some children, only understand consequences. And if I wanted my mornings back, my driveway back, my sanity back, I was going to have to give them a little lesson. I didn't know exactly what that would look like yet, but one thing was certain. Tomorrow, I wasn't just watching anymore. Tomorrow, they would face a reckoning. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely energized, like a detective in a bad movie who'd finally found a lead. This wasn't just about a car anymore, it was reconnaissance. If I was going to win back my driveway, I needed to know the enemy. So I made myself a cup of coffee, grabbed my binoculars, don't ask, and assumed the posture of a very bored, slightly obsessive neighborhood sleuth. The first thing I noticed was the timing. He arrived like clockwork, 7:45 a.m. down to the minute. No stray traffic, no I'm running late excuses. It was ritualistic, as if had its own alarm system synced to his ego. That meant I had a small window every morning to act before he came back, and windows, I've learned, are opportunities, not inconveniences. Next, I tracked his route. He never took the main road, he preferred the little side street that cut behind our houses. Smart kid. Quiet approach, less chance of drawing attention. He also tended to park with one wheel on the curb, which I'm convinced was deliberate. It made getting around the car a theatrical squeeze, turning me into some contortionist who could perform acrobatics with a coffee cup. There were patterns in behavior too. He got out in a particular way, slow, exaggerated, like he wanted people to admire exactly how unbothered he was. He always checked his phone first, then tossed the keys into the bowl by the door like he'd completed a heroic quest. The mother, she was usually still inside, hair in a towel, half listening to whatever personal assistant whispered affirmations into her ear. Sometimes she'd step out and give him a look that meant, "Yes, you may park wherever you please." It was a whole pageant of entitlement. I tried disguises. Not full-on spy gear, though it would have been funny, just normal activities that allowed me to watch without seeming weird. I jogged past, which gave me a legitimate reason to be outside, though my knees protested. I watered the plants at odd hours. I even pretended to be on a phone call while peeking through the blinds like some kind of suburban ninja. The neighbors were either puzzled or entertained. Mrs. Henderson waved as if I was finally providing the entertainment our block lacked. As I mapped his comings and goings, I started making notes. A notebook is underrated for villain tracking. I wrote down times, gestures, and small vulnerabilities. For example, he left the car alarm off more often than not. He never locked the trunk. On garbage day, he forgot to bring in a bag once and had to run back out, leaving the unattended for a solid 5 minutes. Small things, but those are the cracks in the armor. I also watched how the community reacted when there was present. Most people kept quiet, either out of fear, apathy, or the belief that confronting wealthy kids is a recipe for drama. But a few gave me looks, not the kind but the finally kind, as if they were waiting for someone to stand up. That gave me courage. There's power in not feeling like the only person annoyed by a daily injustice. Of course, the ethical part of me tried to keep things reasonable. I'm not a monster. I didn't want to ruin a car or escalate into something that would turn my quiet street into a courtroom drama. The goal was to inconvenience him in a way that taught a lesson without crossing certain lines. Legal gray area, maybe. Moral high ground, also maybe. But rule one of neighborhood warfare. Make it memorable, keep it proportional, and do it with a little flair. I sketched a few ideas, some ridiculous, some feasible. A fake, reserved sign might work. A cleverly placed floral arrangement in the driver's line of sight could be annoying and harmless. A timed note dispenser that left him a new, increasingly dramatic note each morning. "This is day 6. Still parked here." I laughed at some of my own plans and cringed at others. The real plan would need timing, subtlety, and a guarantee that I wouldn't wake up to an angry HOA letter or 3 men in expensive suits at my door. On the 5th day of surveillance, I was almost caught. He came out earlier than usual. Maybe he'd noticed something. Maybe he'd just felt like leaving at 7:40, and I mid-jog froze like an animal in headlights with a watering can. He glanced up, smirked, and said, "Morning, neighbor. New hobby." I smiled, muttered something about gardening, and went inside, heart pounding. Close call. Too close. That night I set a rule: no improvisation. If I was going to do this, it had to be orchestrated. I would use the intel I'd gathered, the 5-minute vulnerability during trash runs, the unlocked trunk, the habitual curb parking, and stitch them into a plan that was annoying enough to sting but clever enough to be memorable. I also made a contingency. If things escalated beyond a prank, if he or his mother retaliated in a way that threatened my safety or property, I'd stop. There's a line I didn't want to cross. But for now, the line was faint, and the idea of restoring my mornings felt worth the risk. As I closed my notebook, I felt the kind of excitement that comes right before a movie's big scene. Tomorrow would be the first active move. A trial by fire, except my weapon was creativity, not flames. I went to bed with plans buzzing in my head and a single clear thought: this would be fun. Dangerous, maybe, but fun. And if all went well, they would finally stop being a menace and start being a story. A story I'd tell at block parties for years. Tomorrow, the plan moves from paper to pavement. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of excitement and dread. Today wasn't about observation anymore, it was about action. I had spent the past few days watching, nodding, and scheming. Now it was time for my first move. I didn't want to go full chaos mode just yet. No, this was reconnaissance too. the minor strike. A small taste of inconvenience designed to make a point without sparking an all-out neighborhood war. I brewed my strongest cup of coffee, double-shot espresso style, and stepped outside, surveying the battlefield. And there it was, the gleaming under the morning sun, as arrogant and immovable as ever. My heart raced. The first step in any good plan is confidence. The second step is courage. Third step, apparently, is a little bit of creativity. I decided on something harmless, but irritating enough that it would make him notice. I grabbed a few orange traffic cones from the garage, leftover from some old DIY project I never finished, and carefully positioned them around the car. Not blocking the wheels, not illegal, just slightly narrowing the space so getting in and out required him to channel his inner stunt driver. I stepped back and admired my handiwork. It was subtle, yet bold. Then I left a note, not a polite one this time. It read, "Welcome to the obstacle course. Enjoy your morning." I slipped it under the windshield wiper like a secret weapon, retreating to my window to witness the inevitable reaction. It didn't take long. He appeared at exactly 7:45 a.m., like a Swiss clock, as if nothing in the universe could change his routine. He froze when he saw the cones. He stared. One hand went to his forehead, shielding his eyes, like he was trying to understand some abstract art. Then he walked around the car, inspecting my handiwork like a museum curator. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. "Who did this?" he muttered, half incredulous, half offended. I peeked through my blinds, trying not to laugh too loudly. There was no need to answer. The cones, the note, and the subtle narrowing of his personal space spoke volumes. His reaction was priceless, a mix of confusion, anger, and disbelief. And then the mother came outside. She saw the cones and the note and immediately marched over. "What is this? Who put these here?" Her voice was sharp, like a summer thunderclap. I stood casually at the window, sipping my coffee innocently, as if I hadn't orchestrated the entire scene. I could see her evaluating the situation, trying to figure out if this was an accident or a deliberate act of rebellion. Her eyes swept to the car, to the cones, back to the car again. I swear she was calculating the cost of therapy sessions for her son's delicate ego. The boy finally got in the car, grumbling, trying to navigate the cones like some stuntman. I almost applauded. It was elegant, in a tragic sort of way. He managed to back out without hitting anything, muttering under his breath, probably rehearsing some excuse to blame the universe or the HOA. That small victory sent a thrill through me. It wasn't the ultimate payoff, but it was proof that action, smart, harmless, annoying action, worked. He noticed. The mother noticed. And I felt a surge of confidence, like a general who had just tested the defenses of an opponent. By mid-morning, rumors had started spreading. I noticed a few neighbors peeking out their windows, whispering to each other. Some nodded at me, like silent accomplices in my little suburban drama. Even the mailman paused longer than usual, giving me a knowing look as if to say, "About time someone stood up to that." Of course, not everything went perfectly. A delivery driver came by mid-prank and had to squeeze past the cones. I apologized, hiding a smirk, promising myself that future tactics would account for innocent bystanders. Part of this game was skill, and part of it was subtlety. You could cause inconvenience, but chaos for chaos's sake is just messy. As the day ended, I realized something crucial. Minor retaliation worked, but it also escalated expectations. The boy would now expect something every morning. He'd be more alert, more cautious. And the mother? Oh, she was plotting too. I could feel it. That added tension made the game even more exciting. That night, I plotted the next step. The minor retaliation had been successful, but it was only the first ripple. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd escalate carefully. A little more ingenuity, a touch more audacity. They had tasted the first wave of inconvenience, and soon, the main plan would unfold. As I closed my notebook and sipped my coffee, a grin spread across my face. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about principle. It was about reclaiming my mornings. And honestly, it was turning out to be kind of fun. Tomorrow, the game would become real, and I was ready. By the next morning, I had crossed a threshold. The minor retaliation had been a warm-up, a test to see if annoyance could penetrate the armor of entitlement. It had worked, the boy had noticed, the mother had noticed, and I had noticed the thrill of control. But now it was time for something bigger, something that would leave an impression without crossing any serious lines. I started my day earlier than usual, sipping my coffee with a sense of purpose. This wasn't about spontaneity anymore, it was strategy. I had scouted, observed, and planned down to the minute. Today, I would orchestrate a scenario that would force him to confront the absurdity of his behavior. I gathered a few tools from my garage, a set of lightweight caution tape, a couple of small cones, a folding chair, and some cardboard cutouts. Ridiculous, maybe effective, that was the plan. I laid everything out carefully, mapping the sequence in my head like a director choreographing a scene. Timing was everything. One wrong move, and the entire plan could collapse, or worse, look like petty vandalism rather than clever justice. As the sun rose, I slipped outside under the guise of watering my plants. In reality, I was setting the stage. The cones were positioned to create a gentle obstacle course leading into the driveway, the cardboard cutouts, amusing little cutouts of "Do Not Enter" signs, were strategically placed in front of the car, and the folding chair was stationed at the edge of the driveway as if guarding the sacred space of my property. Every element was designed to be visually absurd but harmless, to frustrate and bemuse simultaneously. At 7:45 a.m., like clockwork, he arrived. The glinted in the sunlight, smug as ever. He slowed, taking in the chaos I had constructed. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, indignation, disbelief. I could practically hear the gears turning as he tried to rationalize what he was seeing. "Who did this?" he asked, voice tight with irritation. I remained inside, pretending to water flowers, my heart hammering in my chest. The mother emerged shortly after, wrapped in her usual silk robe, eyes wide with incredulity. She froze, her gaze bouncing between the cones and the ridiculous cutouts. "What is going on here?" she demanded. I offered a casual wave from the window, smiling innocently, pretending I had just stepped outside for the plants. She squinted, trying to read my expression, probably attempting to decipher whether this was mischief or madness. The boy tried to squeeze into negotiating the obstacle course like a gymnast, muttering under his breath. I suppressed a laugh, the spectacle was perfect. The situation quickly escalated into a comedy of errors. He backed up, misjudged a cone, and nearly clipped a cardboard "no entry" sign. The mother started packing, flailing her arms, demanding explanations that I refused to provide. The boy's frustrations escalated into a dramatic hiss of "This is ridiculous," while I stayed calm, observing, notebook metaphorically in hand. Neighbors were now peeking out, some shaking their heads, some grinning. I could see Mrs. Henderson whispering to Mr. across the street, probably narrating the chaos as if it were a reality show. Their subtle encouragement added to the satisfaction. I wasn't alone in this. By mid-morning, the was parked in a less-than-ideal position, the boy muttering about rules and the mother threatening some form of retribution. I remained inside, sipping coffee and jotting mental notes for the next phase. Minor victories like this were not about immediate payoff, they were about building tension, establishing control, and setting the stage for the main act. As the day ended, I reviewed the events in my mind. The setup had worked brilliantly. The boy was frustrated, the mother was panicked, and the neighbors were entertained. Most importantly, I had maintained my composure while asserting my boundaries in a creative, harmless way. That night, I planned the escalation. Minor pranks had proven effective, but the main plan would require precision, creativity, and perfect timing. This was no longer a simple matter of inconvenience. It was a battle of wit, patience, and strategy. Tomorrow would mark the first major strike, a direct engagement with the itself. The stakes were higher, the risk greater, but the potential for triumph had never felt more satisfying. I went to bed with a grin, knowing that the next morning, the driveway war would reach a whole new level. The morning air felt electric, the kind of hush that happens right before a storm or a very bad decision. I slept badly, excitement, adrenaline, the sort of nervous energy that makes you rehearse an entrance in the shower. This was it, my major move. If the cones and cardboard signs were appetizers, today was the main course. I told myself I wouldn't do anything I'd regret. No real damage. No vandalisms that could end with a court date and a permanent scowl from the HOA. But I also wanted a payoff so theatrical the boy would remember it for life. So I compromised. All spectacle, zero permanent harm. At 5:30 a.m., I crept into the garage like some suburban stagehand. I pulled out supplies that screamed DIY theater. Large black trash bags, biodegradable because I'm not a monster, a roll of bright orange caution tape, a bundle of cheap, removable adhesive vinyl sheets I'd bought for a different, less glorious project, a couple of giant, mocked-up condemned placards printed on cardboard, and a battery-powered fog machine I'd borrowed from my friend, strictly for effect. The plan was ridiculous. The plan was perfect. Timing was everything. He arrived at 7:45, but I needed the driveway to look like the aftermath of a very official, very dramatic incident before he stepped out. I worked like a magician setting up a trick, draping the car in black tarps, which were actually trash bags artfully taped so they looked like heavy industrial sheeting, sticking vinyl, rust patches, and faux dents that peeled off cleanly, slapping on cardboard signs that read "No Operate Hazard," threading caution tape through the wheels so it looked like the car had been cordoned off by authorities. The fog machine sat hidden behind a bush, ready to puff eerie tendrils when the kid arrived, and curiosity did the rest. I also staged a little supporting cast. Two of my friends, willing participants in suburban justice, parked down the street in rental work vests and carried clipboards. They weren't real officials, obviously, but from a distance they would look like inspectors, and distance is the best costume. We rehearsed signals like children planning a school play. When the car was condemned, my friends would stroll out, scan the scene, and ask loudly if anyone lived at the house. That would bait the mother into voicing outrage in front of witnesses, and anything staged in daylight with an audience becomes real in people's heads. At 7:40 a.m., I hid behind my curtains like a guilty puppet master, heart pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. Then I saw him, the boy, rolling down the side street, purring like a contented animal. He skidded into the driveway, stopped, and froze. For half a beat, his face was the perfect mix of confusion and mild panic. Then he smiled nervously, like a magician trying to remember his last trick. The fog machine hissed once and breathed out a ghostly wisp. My friends strolled in, clipboards held like sacred texts. I could see the boy's face go white. The mother appeared, hair in a towel, and the little scene we'd rehearsed began to look disturbingly real. "What happened? Who did this?" she demanded, voice high and brittle. My friends, actors for justice, announced in solemn tones, "We received a report. This vehicle is considered a hazard. It's under quarantine pending inspection." Bingo. The mother's eyes darted everywhere, panic spreading like spilled coffee. The boy circled the car like a lion around its doomed prey, touching the trash bag, peeling off a vinyl patch, and flinching when it came free without leaving a mark. He erupted. There was yelling, a litany of entitled statements, the kind of theatrical meltdown money teaches you. "This is criminal," he shrieked. "Who dares do this to me? My mother will sue." The mother, oscillating between fury and theater, called someone on her phone and said, "They vandalized our car." Loud enough for the street to hear. Now came the most delicious part, the neighbors. People convened like spectators at a spectacle. Mrs. Henderson stuck her head out and clucked, "At last." Mr. filmed the scene like everyone does now, and I watched the boy's meltdown play out in miniature, his threats hanging in the air like cheap confetti. But almost as quickly as triumph rose, a cold sliver of fear cut through me. The mother had the nerve to shout she'd call the HOA. She narrated dramatically into the phone, "They've ruined my son's car, this is harassment." My heart sank a little. Even staged, even harmless, this could spiral. I'd planned for applause, not subpoenas. I stepped outside then, carrying my calm like armor. I wanted to be the reasonable person the neighbors could point to, the one who'd initiated the prank but kept it from becoming monstrous. "Good morning," I said, voice steady. "I see we're having a situation." She spun on me, accusing and sharp. "You did this," she said, certainty dripping from the accusation. People turned, eyes hungry for drama. The boys' tantrums swelled. My two friends, still in character, began to look awkward, shifting from solemn inspectors to embarrassed neighbors when I gave them a subtle nod. "I staged this," I admitted loud enough. "No damage done, all removable. I wanted to make a point about parking in my driveway." Silence. The mother's face contorted outrage, then calculation. "This is harassment," she hissed, and I could tell she was deciding whether to escalate to legal drama or social warfare. The boy, humiliated and furious, stomped away, dragging his mother like a reluctant parade. As they disappeared into their house, I felt a burst of vindication, followed by that familiar, small panic. What happens next? Will she sue? Will the HOA intervene? Will the police knock on my door with a frown and paperwork? I'd won the round, but the war hadn't ended. The looked ridiculous, like a relic of a cartoon meltdown. Neighbors whispered, some cheering, some cautioning. I breathed in, savoring the mixture of triumph and dread. The payoff had been glorious. The consequences were still unknown. That night, as I sat with my notebook and tried to act casual, I mapped out defense strategies. Evidence that no permanent damage occurred, a list of witnesses who saw the car undamaged, and a plan for owning up publicly if needed. It was the adult part of the plan, the part that kept me out of courtrooms and preserved my quiet street. Tomorrow would bring fallout. I didn't yet know whether it would be a lawsuit, a furious HOA meeting, or the boy's mother knocking on my door with a lawyer's number stashed in her bra. But whatever came, I felt oddly ready. The had been taught a lesson. Now we'd see if the rest of the neighborhood would enforce it, or if rules only applied to people who weren't spoiled. The morning after the prank, the neighborhood felt different. You could practically sense the tension hanging in the air like fog. I stepped outside cautiously, coffee in hand, ready to assess the aftermath. The street was quiet, suspiciously quiet, until I saw her, the mother, standing at the end of her driveway, hands on her hips, glaring like a cartoon villain who just discovered someone moved the plot twist. She spotted me immediately. "You," she barked, voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. "This is harassment, you've gone too far." I raised my hands in mock surrender. "Harassment? No, just a creative reminder about driveway etiquette," I said calmly, letting the absurdity hang in the air. "All temporary, all harmless, yours is fine." That's when the boy came running out, hair disheveled, red-faced, and muttering what sounded like a combination of insults, threats, and poor poetry. "Mom, they humiliated me in front of everyone." Everyone saw. I could see the neighbors peeking through blinds, out windows, and behind fences. Some tried to hide their grins, others were leaning over their fences like spectators at a circus. I realized in that moment that I wasn't alone. Everyone had witnessed the event. The street had become a stage, and I, for better or worse, was the main performer. Then she pulled out the nuclear option, the HOA. "I'm calling them right now, this is unacceptable behavior," she screeched, fumbling for her phone. I suppressed a laugh. She sounded like a cat hissing at a very clever dog, and in a way I was both amused and apprehensive. HOA drama is never simple. While she called, the boy continued his theatrical meltdown, packing around occasionally hitting the side of the car in frustration. I considered filming it for posterity, purely for evidence, of course, but decided against it. Sometimes, letting chaos unfold in real life is better than capturing it digitally. When the HOA representative finally arrived, I stepped outside to meet them. Two middle-aged men in slightly ill-fitting suits, clipboards in hand, looked at me with polite caution. I explained calmly, this was a staged demonstration. No damage, no permanent harm, just a lesson in basic courtesy. The representative listened, nodding slowly, clearly struggling to parse what he was witnessing. I pointed to the black tarps, the caution tape, and the cardboard signs. "All removable, harmless, and the car is untouched," I'd be happy to show you. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I see, he said. The mother, still fuming, interjected, but it's psychological harassment. How can you? I cut her off with a serene smile. The is fine, the child is fine. But perhaps, in future, parking in someone else's driveway without permission is a lesson you might want to teach at home, not rely on me to enforce. A neighbor popped her head out. Finally, someone stands up to that, she whispered conspiratorially. Others nodded behind curtains. Even from my modest vantage point, I could feel the tide turning. I wasn't a menace. I was a boundary enforcer, a quiet hero of suburban logic. The mother, however, wasn't done. Over the next few days, she tried everything: furious phone calls, emails to the HOA, and even attempting to rally neighbors on her side. Some went along, at least to humor her. But the truth was clear. I had set the stage, and public opinion had subtly shifted in my favor. People respected someone willing to enforce their own space, even if it required dramatic flair. Meanwhile, the boy sulked inside, forbidden to use my driveway again. He would occasionally peer out from behind blinds, glaring at me like a tiny, furious hawk. The remainder parked neatly in his garage, apparently traumatized from its theatrical encounter. By the end of the week, normalcy, or as close as it could be, returned. The driveway was mine, the car had learned its boundaries, and the mother's threats had dwindled to muttered complaints. Neighbors gave me nods of approval. Mrs. Henderson even stopped by for coffee, quietly congratulating me. Well done, she said, as if I'd just defended the honor of the entire block. Sitting on my porch that evening, I reflected on the events. The prank had escalated beyond anything I expected. What began as minor retaliation had grown into a full-blown suburban drama, complete with spectators, moral lessons, and a child learning the hard way that the world doesn't revolve around his. And yet, beneath the humor and chaos, there was a deeper satisfaction. I had stood up for my space, my routine, and my sanity. I had navigated the tightrope between cleverness and conflict, and I had emerged victorious. But as much as I enjoyed the victory, I knew one truth: people like her don't quit easily. There would always be lingering tension, small tests of boundaries, maybe even another adventure. But for now, I had won the morning battle. The driveway was mine, the street was quiet again, and the lesson had been delivered with style, precision, and just the right amount of chaos. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would enjoy the calm. The war was won, for now. And I could finally sip my coffee in peace, without fear of being boxed in by entitlement on four wheels. The morning after the chaos had finally settled, I stepped outside with a sense of quiet victory. The war was over, at least for now, and my driveway had been reclaimed. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and for the first time in weeks, my coffee didn't have to compete with adrenaline. I could finally enjoy the little pleasures of suburban life without fear of a shiny, four-wheeled invader. The boy didn't show up that morning. Neither did his mother. I assumed she had learned a valuable lesson: boundaries exist, and ignoring them comes with consequences. The sat securely tucked away in the garage, its tires untouched, its shine undiminished. But its presence was no longer a threat. It had been humbled, at least a little. As I sipped my coffee on the porch, I reflected on the entire saga. What had started as polite notes and gentle hints had escalated into a full-blown strategic operation. I had observed, planned, and executed with precision, creativity, and a touch of humor. The minor pranks had been fun, but the major setup, the staged hazard, had been the turning point. It wasn't about causing damage or humiliation. It was about sending a message: my property, my rules. Neighbors began to reappear after their brief avoidance of the drama. Mrs. Henderson smiled as she walked by, giving me a subtle nod of approval. Even Mr., who had spent the week narrating the events from behind his fence, waved and chuckled. It was clear that the entire block recognized what had happened, and in their eyes, I wasn't just a frustrated homeowner. I was a champion of common sense. The mother never came forward again. Rumor had it she had scolded her son thoroughly, warning him that suburban warfare comes with consequences he hadn't anticipated. The boy himself had learned the hard way that entitlement only goes so far. For a while, at least, they would behave. Reflecting on the experience, I realized the value of strategy, patience, and creativity. Diplomacy had failed, humor had failed, but well-planned action had succeeded. It was a lesson in asserting boundaries without crossing into chaos, a skill I hadn't appreciated until my mornings were threatened daily by a spoiled teenager and a luxury car. There was also a humorous side I couldn't ignore. The absurdity of the situation, from traffic cones and cardboard signs to fog machines and staged inspectors, made me laugh when I remembered it. Life is too short not to find humor even in conflict. And in this case, humor had been a tool, a way to diffuse tension while still taking a stand. I also realized how important community support can be. Even the quiet nods from neighbors or whispered encouragement from Mrs. Henderson reinforced that standing up for yourself doesn't have to be lonely. Sometimes, just the act of showing courage in a small, everyday conflict can inspire others and shift the dynamics in your favor. As the day wore on, life returned to normal. The driveway was clear, the stayed inside, and I could finally park my car without doing acrobatics. I even left a small, playful note for the boy inside the garage, a little reminder: rules exist for a reason. Drive safely and respect others. It was my subtle way of closing the chapter firm, humorous, and final. Looking back, I realized this experience taught me more than just lessons about driveway etiquette. It taught me patience, strategic thinking, and the importance of standing your ground. It reminded me that sometimes you have to fight small battles to maintain your peace, and that cleverness and creativity can achieve what politeness cannot. That evening, I poured myself a celebratory cup of coffee, sat on my porch, and let the quiet settle around me. The street was peaceful again, the chaos of the past week now a memory, and that symbol of arrogance was no longer a threat. I had won, not through aggression, but through ingenuity, observation, and a bit of daring. And as I watched the sunset, I knew that if a problem ever arose again, spoiled children, entitlement, or rogue luxury vehicles, I was ready. The lessons of the driveway had been learned, the street had been defended, and my mornings were finally, gloriously, my own. Victory had its humor, its drama, and its quiet satisfaction. And for now, that was enough. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.